In a White House press conference today, the president said he has been watching the Occupy Wall Street protests on television and believes this is what Occupy Wall Street is trying to tell him.
I think it expresses the frustrations that the American people feel, that we had the biggest financial crisis since the Great Depression, huge collateral damage all throughout the country, all across Main Street. And yet, you're still seeing some of the same folks who acted irresponsibly trying to fight efforts to crack down on abusive practices that got us into this problem in the first place.
The newest Republican presidential frontrunner in the latest Economist YouGov poll, Herman Cain, said that he has taken this message from Occupy Wall Street.
Rather than going to Wall Street, complaining to people at big banks or big businesses, why not pick at the White House because the policies have failed? And so all it is a distraction on the part of those who are trying to distract from these failed policies.
Joining me now on his book tour from the Barnes & Noble in Woodlands, Texas, is Herman Cain, Republican presidential candidate and frontrunner. He's the author of This is Herman Cain, My Journey to the White House. Thank you very much for joining me tonight, Mr. Cain.
Thanks, Lawrence. It's my pleasure.
Mr. Cain, in the president's news conference today, the president came out in support of the Senate Democrats' idea of paying for his jobs bill with a 5% surtax on income over $1 million. And a recent NBC Wall Street Journal poll showed overwhelming bipartisan support for increasing taxes on incomes over $1 million. That's 81% support for increasing taxes for incomes over $1 million. Has the Democratic Party somehow managed to brainwash 81% of the American people into supporting that idea?
The answer is yes. The Democrats have succeeded at brainwashing a lot of the American people. First of all, taxing people more that make over $1 million isn't going to solve the problem. Secondly, they have just taken class warfare to another level. When for decades you are telling the American people that we ought to take more from the rich in order to help pay off our debts, but yet the debts don't get paid off, they are just playing the class warfare card. I would counter that, Lawrence, with 50% of the taxpayers now pay 97% of the taxes. I think that's pretty fair already.
Mr. Cain, you've also said in the past that African Americans have been brainwashed into voting for Democrats. That's an awful lot of successful brainwashing by Democrats. You're now saying that Democrats have successfully brainwashed Republicans, brainwashed Democrats, brainwashed 81% of the country into thinking that there should be higher income taxes on incomes over $1 million. You're willing to take your brainwash idea and accuse 81% of the American public of being brainwashed.
Okay, you asked two questions, Lawrence. Let's separate the two, okay? The first one relative to brainwashing Black Americans, they have successfully brainwashed a lot, not all. I didn't say all. They brainwashed a lot of Black Americans into just voting Democrat and not even considering an idea that would come from a conservative or Republican. The second part, yes, some people, both Republicans and Democrats, have bought into the class warfare card, but a lot of people haven't. So, you know, that number could be 81% or 85%. That just means that they've been succeeding. Now, what I'm doing is to try and unbrainwash people by presenting solutions that will allow everybody to try and achieve their dreams based upon their own individual effort in this nation. That's what this nation is supposed to be about.
Mr. Cain, we asked our viewers to submit questions on Twitter. You won't be surprised. They're asking about the brainwashing. We have one Twitter question that says, ask him how he would ever expect to gain the African-American vote when all he's done is insult our intelligence.
Well, first of all, I did not insult the intelligence of all Black Americans. I insulted the attitude of those that will not consider an alternate idea. And the other point that I made that doesn't get talked about is I said that the good news is more and more black Americans are thinking for themselves. So they did not consider my statement insulting because a lot of them are thinking for themselves. And so I don't see that as insulting them. Now, if they want to talk about insulting, they need to look at the president when he talked to the Congressional Black Caucus and insulted black people, in my opinion, by telling them to take off their slippers and put on their marching boots when he has had nothing but failed policies. That's insulting to me, not the fact that some people won't even consider an alternate idea like my 999 plan. Take a look at it. It is not partisan.
We're going to get to that, absolutely. Mr. Cain, I want to ask you about another insult that flew through our culture this week that got a lot of attention. Hank Williams Jr. got fired from the Monday Night Football coverage team because he said this on Fox News.
You mean when John Boehner played golf with President Obama?
Oh, yeah, and Biden and Kasich, yeah,
What did you not like about it? It seems to be a really pivotal moment for you.
Come on. It'd be like Hitler playing golf with Netanyahu, okay?
Do you agree that Hank Williams Jr. should have been fired for equating President Obama with Adolf Hitler, the killer of 6 million Jews and countless other American troops and other soldiers and civilians during World War II?
Lawrence, he didn't call President Obama by name, first of all, and secondly, that was a poor choice of words, and thirdly, that was the decision of the network as to whether to fire him or not, okay? That's all I have to say about that.
Would you fire anyone?
The network's decision,
would you fire anyone in your campaign who said that sentence?
If someone in my campaign were to exercise a poor choice of words in that regard, that is a possibility. It would depend upon the context. But he did not call President Obama by name when he used that metaphor.
All right, in your book, you write, the book you're selling down there at Barnes & Noble today, you write, the civil rights movement was a few years in front of me. I was too young to participate when they first started the freedom rides and the sit-ins. So on a day-to-day basis, it didn't have an impact. I just kept going to school, doing what I was supposed to do, and stayed out of trouble. I didn't go downtown and try to participate in sit-ins. Counter to our real feelings, we decided to avoid trouble by moving to the back of the bus when the driver told us to. Dad always said, stay out of trouble, and we did. Where do you think black people would be sitting on the bus today if Rosa Parks had followed your father's advice?
My father was not giving Rosa Parks advice. Here again, Lawrence, you are distorting the intent of what I said. I was a high school student. The college students were doing the sit-ins. The college students were doing the freedom rides. If I had been a college student, I probably would have been participating. But if you are a high school student in the 10th or 11th grade, you're under 18 years of age, you didn't need to get arrested and be in the middle of that. That was the intent of what I said relative to me not being involved. Now, I was impacted by that on a daily basis simply because I was living in Atlanta, Georgia when all of this was going on. It was not prudent. This is what my dad meant. It was not prudent for a high school student to be in the middle of what was going on in terms of those demonstrations. And thanks to Rosa Parks, yes, she struck a chord with a lot of people that helped to lead to the desegregation of the buses, as well as she was a big part of the whole civil rights movement. And we are all very grateful to her for that.
Mr. Cain, in fact, you were in college from 1963 to 1967, at the height of the civil rights movement, exactly when the most important demonstrations and protests were going on. You could easily, as a student at Morehouse, between 1963 and 1967, actively participated in the kinds of protests that got African Americans the rights they enjoy today. You watched from that perspective at Morehouse House, when you were not participating in those processes, you watched black college students from around the country and white college students from around the country come to the South and be murdered, fighting for the rights of African Americans. Do you regret sitting on those sidelines at that time?
Lawrence, your attempt to say that I sat on the sidelines is an irrelevant comparison that you're trying to deduce from that particular point in time.
It's in your book.
Now, Lawrence, I know what's in my book. Now, let me ask you a question. Did you expect every black student in every black college in America to be out there in the middle of every fight? The answer is no. So for you to say, why was I sitting on the sidelines, I think that that is an inaccurate deduction that you are trying to make. You didn't know, Lawrence, what I was doing with the rest of my life. You didn't know what my family situation may have been. Maybe, just maybe, I had a sick relative, which is why I might not have been sitting in or doing the freedom rides. So what I'm saying, Lawrence, is, with all due respect, my friend, your deduction is incorrect, and it's not logical, okay?
Well, I gave your book a fair reading, and I didn't read anything about a sick friend. What I read was a deliberate decision to not participate in the civil rights movement and the civil rights protests, and I read a misleading sentence that indicated that in time you were, that what you tried to say here in the show, that you were in high school at that time, when in fact you were in college from 1963 to 1967, right where it was happening, in Atlanta, Georgia.
Lawrence, I'm gonna try this one more time. I graduated from high school in 1963. Okay, I didn't start college until the fall of 1963. Now, I don't understand why you are trying to make a big deal out of this small point when we have an economy that is on life support. We got 14 million people out of work, and you want to try and deduce something that is incorrect from my words in my book, okay? Let's do the people of this country a service, Lawrence.
All right, let's go to something you said on The View the other day. You said on The View that being gay is a choice, and we got a question on Twitter today that says, how can you say that being gay is a choice? Did you choose to be straight?
Lawrence, there will always be a difference of opinion. Like I told Joy Behar, she has her opinion, I have my opinion. It's a difference of opinion. Next question, please.
The next question is coming up. And we're back with the next question in my interview with Herman Cain. Okay, you've said that you don't think you could run on a ticket with Rick Perry based on some of his positions that he holds as of now. I'm not sure if you're open to the idea of him changing those positions. Could you join the ticket with him? But could you, as you know, what you know about Mitt Romney, could you join Mitt Romney's ticket in the vice presidential slot if he asked you to do that?
It would depend upon sitting down with Governor Romney, if he got the nomination, to decide and make a decision based upon everything that I knew at that point as to whether or not I could run on the ticket with him. I think it's premature to say definitively one way or another because, as you know, campaigns go through phases. And Governor Romney has at times changed his position on issues. I would have to be assured that the position that meant the most to me, that he and I were consistent. I could not be the vice presidential candidate for someone where we had some basic philosophical differences.
Would it be a problem if he had positions in the past that were the opposite of yours? For example, just 6 years ago, he was a supporter of abortion rights. Just 6 years ago, he supported comprehensive immigration reform in 2006, a very short time ago. One of the issues, one of the big problems you have with Rick Perry immigration, Mitt Romney was to his left at certain points in this discussion over the years. He said he wanted to be a stronger advocate for gay rights than Ted Kennedy when he was running against Ted Kennedy not that long ago. He says that climate change is real, that human activity is contributing to it, and so on. He also raised taxes as the governor of Massachusetts. Do you see enough distance between now and then on those Romney positions that you would be comfortable with where he stands now and not concerned with where he used to stand?
First, Lawrence, I would like to say I'm in this to win it. I have focused on what I need to do to win the nomination. I have not spent a lot of time analyzing all of Governor Romney's past positions or all of his current positions. I have not spent a lot of time analyzing all of Governor Perry's past positions, and only briefly have I looked at some of his current positions. So what I'm saying is it is totally premature for me to say definitively one way or another whether I could or could not, because my focus is on winning the Republican nomination for president.
Mr. Cain, you've said that if you're unemployed and if you're poor, blame yourself. Would you like to retract that now? Would you like to say to the millions of unemployed in this country, the fact that they do not have jobs, that this economy has shrunk, is not their fault, and you apologize for saying that about them?
Lawrence, some people are unemployed for no fault of their own. I was referring to those people who have chosen to go and demonstrate on Wall Street for whatever reason, and it's not real clear what reasons. I have been one of the strongest advocates for getting this economy growing because I care about the 14 million people that are unemployed. My comment was directed at the people who are choosing to demonstrate against those on Wall Street rather than demonstrate against the White House, which is responsible for any effective policy that will impact this economy. That's where they ought to be demonstrating, and that was where my comment was directed, not at the people who are unemployed for no reason of their own.
Mr. Cain, what are you grateful to this government for? You served in the Navy, and the Navy paid for you to go and get a graduate degree while you were in the Navy. Are you grateful to the government for doing that? Are you grateful to this government for passing the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, or anything that the government has done during your lifetime? Is there anything that you thank the federal government for?
First of all, let's get the record straight. I didn't serve in the Navy. I was a civil servant. I started working for the Department of the Navy as a mathematician, ballistics analyst. I am grateful for the opportunity that the government gave me to assist me in getting my graduate education with a graduate fellowship program that they had. I am grateful for this government for passing the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And I might point out that Democrats alone did not pass those two pieces of legislation. In fact, if you look at the record, a larger percentage of Republicans voted for it than the percentage of Democrats in 1964 and in 1965. I am grateful for the United States of America being a nation that can change, because in our short 235-year history, it is our ability to change that has allowed us to become a great nation. I am grateful that I have been able to achieve my American dreams in this great nation, which is why I'm running for president of the United States, because I want to make sure that my children and my grandchildren and all of the other next generation have the same opportunity that I had.
I have a question about the commander-in-chief role. I misread your book and its references to the Navy, and I thought you served in the Navy. You're now telling me you didn't. Can you explain how you avoided military service during the Vietnam War and during the draft, and why you should be commander-in-chief if you did successfully avoid military service during the war that came during what would have been your war years? How you, after avoiding the Vietnam War, why should you be commander-in-chief?
Lawrence, you know, do you stay up night to come up with the wording of these questions? Or do you have someone
just
writing
thought of
them
that
for
one
you?
right now when I heard you didn't serve in the Navy or the military during Vietnam.
First of all,
how did you do that?
First of all, Lawrence, first of all, I wanted to clarify the record because I didn't want to be accused later of saying that I served in the Navy. And if you read the book closely, it says I worked for the Department of the Navy. Now, your choice of words say, how did I avoid the Vietnam War? I wasn't trying to avoid the Vietnam War. Here's what happened, Lawrence. I was working in a critical area called exterior ballistics. I worked on something called the rocket-assisted projectile for the Department of the Navy. It was my local board in Atlanta, Georgia, that told me we would rather for you to continue to do that analytical work to help the Navy rather than us draft you. Secondly, when they had the lottery, I made myself available. The year that they had the lottery for the draft, they did not draft me because they didn't get to my number. So I think that's a poor choice of words on your part to say that I avoided the Vietnam War. I made myself available to my country, and they did not draft me. The rest of the time, I was serving my country in a critical role called exterior ballistic analysis. So I am offended with your choice of words in terms of what I was doing during the Vietnam War.
I am offended on behalf of all the veterans of the Vietnam War who joined, Mr. Cain, the veterans who did not wait to be drafted like John Kerry, who joined. They didn't sit there and wait to find out what their draft board was going to do. They had the courage to join and to go and fight that war. What prevented you from joining, and what gives you the feeling that after having made that choice, you should be the commander-in-chief?
Well, Lawrence, we have a difference of opinion, and I would like to move on to talking about how we are going to boost this economy. It's called my 999 plan before we run out of time.
We are not running out of time. Coming up, Herman Cain will talk about his magical 999 plan. We're back with the rest of my interview with the new Republican frontrunner, Herman Cain.
It is a bold plan. The reason it's bold is because this economy is on life support. This is what I had hoped that we would talk more about. And it starts with throwing out the current tax code because it is a mess, and then passing legislation with a 9% business flat tax, a 9% personal income flat tax, and a 9% sales tax. Those three would collect the same amount of revenue as personal income tax, corporate income tax, the capital gains tax, the death tax, and the payroll tax. It would be simpler and fairer to everybody, and it would provide certainty to the business community such that they could begin to plan for growth instead of planning for survival, which is what they're doing right now. Now, 999 plan is a bold plan that will boost this economy.
I'm not going to argue the point about how much revenue it would raise. You say it raises enough. Everything I've read about it shows that it raises half of the revenue that we currently raise, so you would have to cut government spending by half. But the point I want to get to in the tax part of it is... No, Lawrence.
I can't let you make a statement that is incorrect. Anybody that said that the 999 plan will only raise half of the revenue, they are dead wrong. They have changed the assumptions. We did a very careful analysis to come up with this. So I cannot let you say it's only going to raise half of the revenue, because that simply is not true. Next question.
Okay, let's go to the bottom tax bracket and how they would be affected. The lowest federal taxpayers currently pay in single digits, like 2–4%. They end up paying a net of about 2 or 4% of their income in federal taxes. Under your plan, the lowest income federal income taxpayers would suddenly end up paying 18% of their income in federal taxation. 9% of their income they would pay, and then they'd pay 9% on every single thing that they purchased, and they use all of their income every year to purchase it. So it would be the most dramatic increase on the working poor in this country in taxation that we have ever seen. How could you justify that?
Well, first of all, your calculations are incorrect. Remember, if they're working and they're drawing a paycheck, they are paying 15.3% off the top of their income. So relative to their income, they're going to go from 15% down to 9%. They're going to pick up a 6 percentage point gain. Now, if they are, in fact, in the lowest income bracket, that 6% will be more than enough to compensate for them spending the rest of their money and paying the sales tax on the remainder of their income. Run the numbers is what I ask people to do. Go through the arithmetic, and you will find that it is not 18%. That is an erroneous calculation, because they are not taking into account the elimination of the 15.3% payroll tax.
Herman Cain, Republican front runner for the presidency. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. Thank you for giving us extra time.
Lawrence, I would come back and have a chat with you anytime. Thank you, sir.
We will do it. I can't wait. Thank you very much. Good luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you.
In a White House press conference today, the president said he has been watching the Occupy Wall Street protests on television and believes this is what Occupy Wall Street is trying to tell him.
I think it expresses the frustrations that the American people feel, that we had the biggest financial crisis since the Great Depression, huge collateral damage all throughout the country, all across Main Street. And
American people into supporting that idea.
The answer is yes. The Democrats have succeeded at brainwashing a lot of the American people. First of all, taxing people more that make over $1 million isn't going to solve the problem. Secondly, they have just taken class warfare to another level. When for decades you are telling the American people that we ought to take more from the rich in order to help pay off our debts. But banks or big businesses, why not picket the White House because the policies have failed? And so all it is a distraction on the part of those who are trying to distract from these failed policies.
Joining me now on his book tour from the Barnes & Noble in Woodlands, Texas, is Herman Cain, Republican presidential candidate and frontrunner. He's the author of This is Herman Cain, My Journey to the White House. Thank you very much for joining me tonight, Mr. Cain.
Thanks, Lawrence. It's my pleasure.
Mr. Cain, in the president's new...
yet you're still seeing some of the same folks who acted irresponsibly trying to fight efforts to crack down on abusive practices that got us into this problem in the first place.
The newest Republican presidential frontrunner in the latest Economist YouGov poll, Herman Cain, said that he has taken this message from Occupy Wall Street.
Rather than going to Wall Street, complaining to people at big...
news conference today, the president came out in support of the Senate Democrats' idea of paying for his jobs bill with a 5% surtax on income over $1 million. And a recent NBC Wall Street Journal poll showed overwhelming bipartisan support for increasing taxes on incomes over $1 million. That's 81% support for increasing taxes for incomes over $1 million. Has the Democratic Party somehow managed to brainwash 81% of the American